The sound of gunfire echoes off the canyon walls, punctuated with the ringing of ricochets, the occasional explosion of rock, and the frequent curse word from our heroes. Nestled high up in the rocks are Night Riders, a group of masked men who have been terrorizing the town of Wonderment. Funded by the former gunman Clay Riley, the Night Riders have been trying to drive the people of Wonderment from the town so that Riley could build a smelting factory along the river. One of the town's citizens, a former gunman himself named Reno Jones, wasn't going to let anyone ruin his peaceful life. Aided by the French-Canadian trapper Marcel Fournier and the indigenous medicine man named Flaming Star, they put out the call for heroes. Answering that call are an odd assortment. We've got the Rawhide Kid, along with Outlaw Kid Colt, the believed dead Two-Gun Kid, and the confused Lance Temple, who hunts the Outlaw Kid, who is actually himself. Yeah, it's a thing. This assemblage was making their way back to Wonderment through a pass that they thought was hidden, when they learned that it wasn't so hidden. The Night Riders opened fire, shot Reno Jones in the shoulder, sending him falling into the river below. The other men are now pinned down, but they've got an unknown ace up their sleeve. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 19.4, Blaze of Glory, Part 2. We open issue 3 with the Night Riders, who explain this whole situation to us, so thanks for that, you jerks. We also see two men silently sneak into position, specifically Red Wolf, who hasn't allied with the rest of our heroes yet, and the Outlaw Kid, whose fear in his civilian identity as Lance Temple kept him isolated on the departure end of the thin stone bridge. The guy has some issues to work through for sure. But the Outlaw Kid's bravery isn't in question here. He leaps out from behind his boulder cover, shooting and rolling at the same time. He dispatches a few of the Night Riders, but while rolling, the mask that is covering his face slips off, and the Outlaw Kid personality falls away, leaving a very confused Lance. The Night Riders then close in, eager to avenge their fallen comrades. This is when our heroes jump up and fire at their attackers. One of them charges back across the stone bridge and collects Lance. I can't tell who it is, because they are mostly a black shadow and they're all colored brown, pretty much like everybody else in these couple of pages, so I have no idea who this is supposed to be. Eventually, though, Red Wolf helps kill off the remaining gunmen, which surprises Rawhide Kid. As Red Wolf approaches, Rawhide notes that he is a long way from his lands. Red Wolf replies that once, this whole continent belonged to his people. He goes where he will. He also warns our heroes that more men are on their way to Wonderment. They need to ride. Before they do, Two-Gun pulls Lance's face mask back up, declaring that they don't need him. They need the Outlaw Kid. Now prepared, they ride off on their horses, leaving Red Wolf behind. He watches them leave. When they're gone, he descends into the gorge, where we saw Reno Jones fall last issue. Other than some panel-to-panel confusion, thanks to the weak coloring or vague penciling, this is a solid, exciting opening. The momentum of it flows well, Outlaw Kid and Red Wolf get some pretty cool moments each, and we move on from it pretty quickly. This is solid work. We play catch-up for a moment with the Night Riders, who have been assaulting Wonderment for weeks. For weeks? I don't know if that timeline checks out. Anyways, we're told that the Night Riders have been attacking the outlying properties around Wonderment, but that they have finally attacked the town again. The citizens have pretty much given up fighting back at this point, so consumed by fear and hopelessness they are. Who can possibly save them now? Why, 4 marvelous gunmen can! Our heroes charge into town and they open fire, and we get a single page devoted to each one of them. These pages give us a quick explanation as to who each character is, a brief summary of their concept, and what has brought them here. These are incredibly well-rendered pages, but they do suffer from the same lackluster coloring that has plagued the rest of the series so far. The Night Riders are chased off, for now, with Rawhide winging one in the shoulder to encourage the retreat. Slowly, the people of Wonderment come out of their homes. We are told that masked white men attacked them, and now masked white men have saved them. No one says anything to our heroes, until Kid Colt greets them. "Howdy, folks. Heard you could lend a hand." Marcel joins the group, complaining about missing all the action, and explaining that his horse tripped on the way here. Mary Jones, Reno's wife, runs up to Marcel, asking where her husband is. Fournier explains that Reno was shot, and that he fell into the gorge. He apologizes for the loss. Lance Temple, meanwhile, approaches Two Gun. "The Outlaw Kid was here, wasn't he asks. Two Gun confirms this, but he assures Lance that he'll be back. He's pretty confident on that one. One of the citizens offers to find beds for the gunmen so that they can rest up, but Rawhide's attention isn't on this offer. He's watching Marcel, Mary, and Mary and Reno's son, Cass, and he walks over to them. Rawhide promises, more to himself than anyone else, that they're going to make this right. He specifically means the loss of Reno Jones. Reno died to bring hope to this town, and even if they're outnumbered or outgunned, Rawhide will see this town saved. I have to give credit to page 28 specifically of this issue, which is the wind down of the fight scene we just passed through. It's a group shot of the gunmen with the citizens of Wonderment behind them, plus Reno's family in the upper left. It is a great drawing, period, and it's one of those things that probably actually looks better in black and white. The coloring on this page is a bit more colorful, with some blues, purples, and grays added to our ever-present browns. This is also one of the few times where the gunman's skin tone is rendered in white, as opposed to a full figure coat of brown or tan that we've been getting. Obviously, part of the reason to do this is because this scene has a bunch of black folks in it. You can't just block color everyone in one shade anymore. But it also makes the moment pop more in a way that no other single page does in this series. It is also clearly a favorite of the creative team, as it has signatures on it from both Ostrander and Manco, dated simply 98. We then bounce over to the Night Riders, where their masked leader kicks the man who shot Reno Jones and then shoots him in the head. No one kills Reno Jones but him. Another rider then brings up what they're supposed to do about Wonderment. Those gunmen are good shots, and no one here signed up to fight the Rawhide Kid. What, are the rest of them chopped liver? Their leader asks. Then he stands firm. They signed on to do a job, and so they will do the job. Any man who tries to run, he will shoot dead as a skunk himself. They'll send a message to their employer, though, Riley, over in Anaconda. He can hire them some backup, and then they'll hold here for now. He is interrupted by a report that a lone rider is coming through the hills, and so we move to that man. It's Caleb Hammer, the Pinkerton agent who was hunting Kid Colt in issue 2. But when he is asked what his business is, Hammer says that he doesn't see fit to explain himself to some random dudes in the hills. The riders then cock their guns and exit their hiding places, outnumbering Hammer almost 20-1. They don't care much for his tone, so he can either go with them, or they can just kill him here. Take your pick. Hammer's eyes thin. I guess I'll ride with you boys. This isn't just Ostrander picking up on Hammer's plot thread, although, trust me, he is doing that as well. This is also a good way of displaying the Night Rider's ultimate strength. We know that we have 5 gunmen in town who are defending it, sure, but now we know that they are pretty outnumbered. But we also know that the Night Riders are cowards. They don't threaten Hammer at all until all of them are able to do so. Their numbers make it feel like our heroes are in a bad spot, but we also get to know that these Night Riders' hearts just aren't in it. Except maybe their leader. He seems pretty motivated, if only to kill the already dead Reno Jones. In town, our heroes tell the citizens that they'll train them in gunfighting, using the weapons left behind by the dead Night Riders. Young Cass Jones approaches Kid Colt, demanding to be taught as well. Colt tells him not to walk this road, but Cass is insulted. He thought that if anyone understood his desire for vengeance, it would be Kid Colt. Colt became a gunfighter because men stole his father's land and killed his father, Cass says. He read all about it. Then when Colt went to confront the men, they drew on him and he defended himself, killing them. Colt sighs and relates what really happened. Those men did cheat his dad out of his land, that's true, and he suspected that they might have been the ones to kill him too. But what really happened was, he just got so angry and he killed them before they even had a chance to draw, before they had a chance to do anything, really. That is why his pa didn't want him messing with guns. He knew that Colt's anger would make him a danger, and while Colt rarely admits this, his temper is his worst enemy. He has done a lot of work to make up for those murders, but he will not let Cass go down that road. He tells Cass instead to be like his daddy, to make him proud, because he knows that his daddy would not be proud of him. Wow.
No swearing.
Kid Colt coming in with the heartbreak from out of nowhere. This moment echoes where we started, with the idea that Marvel's old Western comics were dime store novels told about these men. Their stories were cleaned up, made sellable, and they did not reflect the lives that these men actually lived. So the stories about Kid Colt that Marvel previously published aren't true stories in this canon. They're more like inspired by stories. But this moment, this particular retelling, this is what is real in Blaze of Glory. This is Colt outright saying what happened to his father and how he has failed to honor him. And man, it really hits. This is single-handedly one of the best emotional moments in Blaze of Glory. I also like that it builds on the previous scenes featuring Colt. Twice now we have seen him act without really thinking, when he joined Rawhide in helping Wonderment, and when he opened fire on Caleb Hammer and his men. Ostrander knows that his audience might not be too familiar with some of these characters, but he also has the freedom to reinterpret them by making this story, meaning Blaze of Glory, the true story. And he writes the characters consistently throughout, so Colt suddenly feels much more like a sympathetic character than a cocky hothead who should be condemned. He has killed people, and not always because it was justified. He killed because he lost his temper, and he has been on the run ever since, trying to make good. Kid Colt never turned himself in. He did not make legal amends for his actions. He ran, and he's been running ever since. And he doesn't want that kind of life for Cass. That's just some good flooping writing! Whew! That night, the bounty-hunting Gunhawk is also found by the Night Riders and brought to their camp. He is introduced to Hammer, and they discuss the fact that they're both after the same man, Kid Colt. Hammer sees this as a good thing. If the two of them can go to town and pull Colt out of there, it would only be a good thing to these riders, right? However, the Night Riders don't agree. They don't need two men that they don't trust involved in this fight. So, the leader makes them an offer. They'll get their guns back, and then the pair of them can duel. The winner gets Colt. If they turn on and attack the riders, well, the riders will kill them. Both men strap their gun belts back on. Gunhawk tells Hammer that this isn't personal. He'll kill him quick. The two men stare each other down. Their fingers creep towards their pistols, and a gunshot breaks the tension. It isn't from either Hammer or Gunhawk, though. On a nearby ridge, a man dressed in all white carries a long rifle and sits upon a white horse. Some of the riders cry out in fear, recognizing the figure. He calls out in a raspy voice, "That they have awakened the fury of the Ghost Rider!" Gunhawk and Hammer explode into motion, taking advantage of the Ghost Rider's distraction. They loose some shots into the Night Riders, kick their own fire at them, and then steal a few horses. The Ghost Rider provides cover as the two men manage their escape with one goal in mind: to get to Wonderment. The Ghost Rider calls out that Wonderment is now under his protection. If they continue to attack, the gates of hell itself will open wide for them. And then he turns and rides off into the night. The Night Riders gather back up and pull themselves together. One of them asks their boss what they're going to do now. The leader knows that Riley has a strong hate for the Ghost Rider. Send another rider to Anaconda, he commands. With this new threat, Riley's gonna send whatever they need to finish the job. With the appearance of the Ghost Rider, we have finally seen all of our classic Western comics characters. They still aren't a team, and as far as I'm concerned, they won't be, but they have all got the same enemy here. And that's close enough. If you're familiar with the name Ghost Rider from cartoons or maybe the movies, you're probably familiar with the flaming skull-headed motorcycle rider whose real name is Johnny Blaze. Or maybe you know Robbie Reyes, who drives a Charger and whose skull looks more like something out of Evangelion than out of a biker magazine. Or maybe you're a child of the 90s like me, and Danny Ketch is your Ghost Rider of choice. All of those characters draw from the same well, and that well is this dressed all-in-white gunfighter. He has no special abilities, he did not make a deal with the devil, he doesn't shoot flames or have a face that melts off, he's just a solid spooky gunman. And I like him being used as a spooky, ghost-like figure here. Given that the character is designed to look like a ghost, but, with a Western theme, it makes sense to keep him some distance from the audience. We don't get to know who this man is. We don't know his motivations or what he's doing here. Why is he helping Wonderment? Well, we don't know. All we know is that he is a ghostly guardian, and that our cast is outnumbered almost 4-1. They need whatever edge they can get, and the Ghost Rider will certainly provide one. We also have Gunhawk and Hammer pushing in towards Wonderment. Now, it is important to note that both of these men were portrayed as heroes in their Marvel Comics appearances previously, and they are attempting to bring a known killer to justice, Kid Colt. But can we expect them to join our heroes in saving Wonderment, or are they going to keep their focus on capturing the kid? I want to hope that maybe they join their heroes, but this story isn't those old comics. It's the truth. And maybe, just maybe, these two are going to prioritize their job over helping people, because that is certainly more real. That's some good tension that we wouldn't have had if Ostrander hadn't taken the time to preface this story, or show us the truth behind Kid Colt's origin earlier. Again, very smart writing. Ostrander clearly knows what he's doing. It's just such a pleasure to see this level of plotting and planning at work. So all of our cast is now closing in on each other. Our heroes, our villains, and everyone in between. We are headed to Wonderment and the last ride. Issue 4 opens with Hammer and Gunhawk riding into town. Gunhawk says that he owes Ghost Rider a beer for helping them out, but he isn't quite sold on Hammer yet. They still have a problem. They're after the same man. Hammer agrees with the basic idea, but Gunhawk is just after a bounty, and Hammer has a federal warrant. Plus, Colt killed 2 of Hammer's friends, which we saw in issue 2. Gunhawk agrees to give Hammer the first crack at Colt then, and when Colt puts a bullet in him, Gunhawk will take his turn. A kid overhears this as they're on their way into town, and he races to the nearest saloon. He bursts in, shouting, "Kid!" And our 4 main characters all turn, replying, "Yeah?" Which is a solid joke. I don't care who you are. I have avoided making fun of the fact that we have 4 different characters named Kid something or something Kid in this story, because every feature that I have read on the Marvel Western Heroes pokes fun at it, and it was just a solid storytelling convention. To me, calling every character Kid is no more stupid than comic books having a Batman and a Spider-Man and an Iron Man and every type of man you can think of, because that's what's sold. It sells you immediately on what the concept is. So, for me, I tried to avoid making this joke. I just figured I'd let Ostrander do it for us, because this is great. This is great. I love it. The child tells them about Hammer, and, of course, Kid Colt runs outside to confront him. We get a short standoff between them all, with Rawhide arguing that they need Kid Colt in order to overcome their problem here. Having encountered that problem on the way in, Hammer is willing to let Colt and his posse finish their job, and then he'll take Colt in. Everyone basically agrees to this, and Colt actually offers to buy Hammer a beer. Hammer turns him down, though. He only drinks with friends, and thanks to Colt, he has a few less of those. Colt draws his gun, preparing to shoot Hammer in the back now, but Rawhide stops him. Whatever he said to Hammer goes for Colt, too. If he shoots Hammer in the back, then he'll face Rawhide up front, you understand? So we might have an alliance here, but it is an uneasy one for sure. I do like Colt making a peace offering to Hammer in the form of a beer. He knows that Hammer is not a bad man or an evil man, he's doing his job. And if Hammer can trust Colt for now, then he is willing to trust Hammer in return. Remember, Colt has been trying to make up for his initial murders. He wants to be a good guy, so he reaches out, but Hammer slaps him away. And understandably so. We bounce to Anaconda for a brief moment, where Clay Riley gets word about the Ghost Rider, and he swears that he'll see Wonderment as his, even if he has to kill everyone in it. He orders this man to hire every gun in town that he can. The Night Riders are getting their reinforcements. Back in Wonderment, we see Cass Jones practicing his shooting. He fires the gun at some cans resting on a nearby tree, but it also knocks him on his butt. Lance Temple was watching this, but when the kid is knocked over, he approaches, asking what he's doing. Cass replies that his father is dead, and someone needs to protect his ma. And what do you know about it anyways? He asks angrily. Lance bows his head. He knows more than you might think, kid. Lance is acknowledging the actions that led him to becoming the Outlaw Kid, but does he know that he is the Outlaw Kid? It's really hard to tell because of this scene. It almost feels like Lance is admitting his double identity to Cass. He admits that he used guns, which his father forbade, and he admits that using those weapons is what caused his paw to drop dead. But Lance justified that by blaming the Outlaw Kid for his father's death. So when he says that he understands the situation, does that mean he just can't admit it to himself, but he knows that Lance and the Outlaw are the same person? The story has certainly weaponized Lance's mental illness so far. We've seen Kid Colt activate the Outlaw Kid by pulling up Lance's mask, and we have seen the Outlaw Kid turn back into Lance when the mask came down. So this scene reads a bit more unevenly for me than Kid Colt's scene with Cass. The story parallels between Colt and Cass were a very obvious connection. They both lost their dads, and they both want revenge. But Outlaw's connection to Cass is much more vague. We've seen that Reno Jones wasn't proud of his history as a gunfighter, and neither is Lance. But where Lance refuses to use guns at all because of his father, Reno was clearly willing to use guns in order to defend the things that he loves. So this emotional beat doesn't quite sync up for me. This painful reverie is broken by the Rawhide Kid shouting Marcel's name. He got a bit suspicious of Marcel after that secret passage of his nearly got them killed. And then, right before the gunfight happened, Marcel's horse got injured. So he checked out Marcel's horse, and the only wound on it matches a knife wound. A wound that matches Marcel's knife. The French-Canadian suddenly grabs Cass and puts a gun to his head. "Keep your hands clear, or the kid dies. He wants to ride out of town with Cass. And when he's safe, he'll send the kid back." This betrayal confuses the crap out of the two-gun kid. "Marcel, you were the one who got me into this. Why would you recruit me if you were working for the Night Riders?" Marcel didn't expect Two-Gun to say yes, though. He was retired. He should have said no, damn it. Two-Gun holds his pistol up and holds it steady. You figured wrong. With ease, Two-Gun shoots Marcel. It happens so fast that Marcel doesn't even have time to fire at Cass. If Fournier was Riley's spy, then they'll know their plans to defend the town, Rawhide figures. With him dead, the Night Riders will move up the attack, so they should expect trouble tonight. I complained last episode that the strange race and accent change for Marcel Fournier made me think that Ostrander hadn't read Sunset Riders before writing this story. Well, this is a moment that makes me think that he did. Fournier's fake betrayal of his allies in that story is echoed here by his actual betrayal of our cast. I don't think that Ostrander would have known about Fournier's fake-out in Sunset Riders without actually having read those comics, but that still leaves all of Marcel's conceptual problems here. Why is he white? Why has his accent gotten up to Gambit's level of silliness? I just don't know, and quite frankly, I find it to be pretty frustrating in a story that is really excellently executed so far. It is also just disappointing in general to see Fournier actually be a bad guy here. When I first read Sunset Riders, I actually read it after I read Blaze of Glory. So my initial bit of knowledge about Marcel was that he betrays the good guys. However, while I was reading Sunset Riders, I never once doubted that Marcel was a good guy. Even though Niceza has a moment where he betrays the other riders, Marcel only did that in order to get close enough to learn where their treasure was, and then he immediately returns to the group and helps them. Niceza's Marcel feels like he is a good guy through and through throughout the entire story, while Ostrander's Marcel is a traitor with no motivation. If Ostrander had read Riders, then maybe he is playing with that expectation, that as the audience we believe that Fournier is a good guy to his core, but that in this interpretation he isn't. He's just as flawed and human as the rest of the cast, and so he actually does betray them. But again, if Ostrander is counting on us having read Sunset Riders in order to play with that expectation, then why would he make such extreme changes to Fournier's physical appearance? I just don't get it. Before the sun sets, Rawhide meets up with Flaming Star, Ghost Wind Rider, Red Wolf, and his tribe. They could use their help tonight. His people are some of the finest light cavalry that Rawhide has ever seen. But Flaming Star is shrewd. What do his people get out of fighting for Rawhide? And the answer is a simple one. The chance to kill white men without the U.S. cavalry running them down. Red Wolf nods. He likes that. And he'll talk to the tribes about helping them. We then get a quick scene of the heroes loading their guns or putting their face masks on so that they turn into the Outlaw Kid, whatever they need to do in order to be ready for the fight. And then Mr. Riley and his reinforcements arrive. They charge into town, screaming and shouting, armed with guns, dynamite. A flooping Gatling gun is strapped to a wagon. These a-holes ain't messing around. Our heroes fire back, but this is more men than they were expecting. The Outlaw Kid drives his own burning wagon into the Night Riders, and he is the only one to exit the resulting fire. It is a sight to behold. But as he moves, his mask slips off. Lance freezes. No. His paw he'll know. But he already knows. Paw, I'm sorry, he cries out in his fugue state. One of the Night Riders steps up. I ain't your paw! And kills him. And there is no question that he kills him either. We see 3 bullets pass through Lance's upper torso, and he drops to the ground. Nearby, Two Gun gets shot off of his horse. Rawhide runs over to him and helps him up. Two Gun might be down, but he ain't out yet. He tells Rawhide to rally the others. He'll cover him. And Rawhide says that he'll see him after. Two Gun nods, and Rawhide adds, Vaya con Dios, which is Spanish for go with God. Two Gun runs into the street and starts firing, drawing attention his way. Rawhide and the others charge into a storefront, jumping through the front window. Mr. Riley shouts, To burn them out! Kill them all! A ghostly voice tells Clay Riley that he is damned. With Riley now exposed for his role in this horror, he must pay. So swears the Ghost Rider! He opens fire on Riley and kills him. But the leader of the Night Riders isn't scared by some man in a white costume. He shoots back, and he scores a hit. The rider falls from his horse, complimenting Cassidy's shot. What? The leader reels back. How does he know that Cassidy is his real name? The Ghost Rider pulls off his mask, revealing the face of Reno Jones, his old partner. Cassidy is glad to see him. Killing him is something that he wanted to do himself. But he doesn't get the chance. A terribly wounded Lance crawls over to the wagon that he had rammed into. Using a burning piece of wood, he lights the dynamite that it had been carrying. The resulting explosion catches Kid Cassidy, knocking him off of his feet. Reno rushes him, wrapping his hands around his throat. He's gonna finish this with his bare hands. Kid Colt, Hammer, and Gunhawk are holed up on the roof of the storefront, picking off Night Riders from above. But their ammo is getting low, and Kid Colt is getting worried. A low rumble fills the air, and Red Wolf charges in with the tribes backing him up, baby. Colt smiles. They might just make it out of this alive after all. Which is when Gunhawk shoots him in the back. Hammer, who had been holding position by the window next to Colt, is horrified. You shot him in the back! Gunhawk starts rifling through Colt's things, claiming what he wants. The bounty for him was dead or alive, and dead worked just fine for him. Hammer aims his shotgun at Gunhawk. He deserved better than to die like that! But Gunhawk doesn't care. He was saddle trash. Whatever he was, Hammer says, he was better than you. He shoots Gunhawk in the chest. And then he leaves both of the men for dead. Eventually, the fighting ends. As daylight brings the morning, the citizens of Wonderment return to their town and the devastation. Mary and Cass are elated to see Reno alive. He explains that after he fell into the river, Red Wolf pulled him out and brought him to Flaming Star. Flaming Star had him put on the Ghost Rider outfit. It seems that he's the caretaker of it. Excitedly, Cass can't help but ask his father, "Are you going to keep it, Pa?" And no, the rider died tonight. Let him find peace in the afterlife, and Reno can find peace in this life. Rawhide finds the shot-up body of Two Gun and says his goodbyes, promising that soon his time will come as well. Ghost Wind Rider asks Red Wolf what he is going to do after all of this, and he is looking forward to walking a new road with her. And she agrees, and they kiss. Reno, with Cass, offers Rawhide and Hammer a home here in Wonderment. They would be welcome after all that they've done. Rawhide turns him down. They've got a town to rebuild, and that's just not what he does. As he and Hammer ride out, the Pinkerton agent asks if it was worth it. After all, Rawhide buried 3 friends back there. He lost 2 of his own and then avenged them along the way, but half of that town died anyway. Was it all worth it? Rawhide's answer is to keep riding. Men die, he says, each and every one of them. Only legends live forever. We cut back to Wonderment, where we find 3 fresh graves in a small hill that is topped with a tree. A vulture sits in the tree looking over the graves. Gun belts hang from the grave markers, their black silhouettes standing out against the colorful sky behind them. So ends the last ride of the Western heroes, their blaze of glory. And personally, I am pretty satisfied. A lot of people generally don't like a tragic ending, and I get that. Tragedies are painful, and we generally want to avoid pain. But pain doesn't always mean that something is bad. And this book, to me, is a good example of that. Is this ending a bitter one? Absolutely. But does it fit? Does it satisfy? Again, absolutely. We were told that this was the last ride at the beginning of the story. It is right there on the cover. And the story absolutely delivers on that note. Almost every Western hero, every major Western character, and even some minor characters either dies or has their story come to a conclusion in this. Like with Red Wolf. He lives, he just settles down. Hammer and the Rawhide Kid survive as well, but the implication is that they go on to other adventures. The people who could have pulled them into more stories along the way have all died. And so, however their lives end, it's probably pretty quietly. This age of Marvel's Western heroes is over. But Ostrander makes sure to include and close out as many of their narratives as possible. Kid Colt is brought to justice for the murders that he committed. Two Gun, who joined this venture because he was tired of being dead, implying that his easier life as Clay Harder wasn't fulfilling, lived one last time, saving his friends and helping people, a story note echoed from Sunset Riders. Gunhawk is punished for his lack of morals. The Outlaw Kid saves lives, and he does it by not shooting people. He blows them up, which isn't really better than shooting, but his father did not prohibit him from dynamiting people, just shooting them, so I suppose it works. That's as good a workaround as I would think. Reno got to face down Kid Cassidy, who tried to kill him once before, and now tried to destroy his peaceful life. Even Mr. Riley, formerly the Outlaw Tarantula, was killed by the Ghost Rider, whose comic book he originated in. There is a very real sense of closure to many of these stories, and Ostrander juggles them all pretty well. There is definitely a lot of quick cuts between the characters and scenes in issue 4, and I'll admit that it can be a bit jarring, but Ostrander always makes sure to explain where we are and what's going on. I was super glad to see Reno come back, and I could not believe that I did not guess that he was the Ghost Rider. Generally speaking, because I spend so much time studying the structure of these things, that's the kind of thing that should have been obvious from the beginning. So I am a little embarrassed that I did not put 2 and 2 together on that one. But glad to see him back. And it's super neat to see him as the Ghost Rider. Given that the modern interpretation of the Ghost Rider is a mantle that is able to be passed down from person to person, I like this rebranding of it. That any man could become the Rider, so long as there is evil to be punished. It is a cool way to bring the Western interpretation of the character a bit in line thematically with the more successful modern versions. Plus, he reunited with his wife and his son, and they get to rebuild Wonderment. For them, this is a happy ending. This is what Reno fought for. Marcel Fournier's character arc is perhaps the least successful here, and not really because he's a traitor. I don't mind that, not really. It is a jerk move, but it is interesting, and I always want my stories to be interesting. Why he betrayed our cast makes no sense to me, though. Ostrander never provides us with an in-story explanation at all. Fournier's actions all line up, and it is certainly a gut-wrenching moment for Two Gun when the betrayal does happen, but why does Fournier side with Riley? He was a hero once before. What changed? Other than, his ethnicity. We are told in the beginning of the story that Marcel is a fur trapper, so his job is the trapping of animals and the sale of their pelts. It would have been fairly easy to add in a small line of conversation where maybe business has been bad the past couple of months. Maybe Riley promised Marcel hunting rights or distribution rights to whatever town he would build in the wake of his smelting factory. Or he could have just promised him a cushy foreman's job or something. Anything would have worked better than nothing. Just anything to give Marcel an actual motivation. And honestly, why did Marcel invite Two Gun along at all? Marcel tells us that he didn't think that Two Gun would come along, sure, but then don't
No swearing.
Tell him, dude. You tell Reno that you know a guy, you ride out, you set up at a nice hotel for a day or two, and then you ride back empty-handed. Fuck.
No swearing.
Hey, man, what kind of stupid
Still swearing.
idiot are you? Marcel really gets the short end of Ostrander's reinvention stick, and it's the one sticking point that really frustrates me throughout all of this book. Outside of this bit of plot stupidity, though, this comic works for me so well. Just super well. In fact, I didn't even hesitate in buying the sequel series that follows up on it. Ostrander and Manco team up one more time to explore a corner of Marvel's West that Blaze of Glory barely touched upon: the suffering of America's indigenous tribes. Join me in a week as the Rawhide Kid loses another friend and makes a new enemy in Comic Book Breakdown episode 19.5, Apache Skies, Part 1. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.